Today I'm joined by Don Fogarty. Don is the head of talent at Attio, helping scale them from 8 to more than 100 employees over the last few years, building one of the most exciting startups in London with an incredibly high bar for talent. Attio is the next generation AI-native CRM, taking on the giants and redefining the category of customer relationship management. Welcome, Don.
Thank you so much, Paddy. It's really great. I've seen some amazing people do this podcast already and learned some stuff. So hopefully something else useful comes from today.
Awesome. I'm sure it will. Before we dive into kind of specifics, it'd be awesome if you could provide us a little bit of an overview of your career to date and, what landed you at Attio and a little bit about your role today.
Yeah, I think there's been some kind of pivotal moments in what's defined my career to date. And it's mainly based around some people. So I'll talk a bit about them and give some background. There's a guy called Dave Allen who gave me my first job in a startup consultancy, but he'd actually been very close to Martin Sorrell scaling the WPP group from the 80s into the early 2000s. And when he left to start his own sort of challenger consultancy, I was one of his early hires. But because of his network, I was like 22, 23 years old and sitting in boardrooms in, places like Ernst & Young with, the C-suite in New York, kind of wondering how and why it was happening. But I reflect on it as this kind of almost like this master's or MBA style program that I accidentally kind of gave myself. It ultimately gave me the confidence to launch my own business because of what I saw at that early stage. And Dave actually invested in Adam and I, and we ran a careers network for graduates. We did that for 4 years. We were very passionate about people realizing their potential, but equally frustrated about how tools like LinkedIn were not leveraging their data, or even systems like, how we're educated were not sort of figuring out where people should go in their careers. Ultimately, neither of us were technical enough to build something that people would invest in. And we also, I think, relatively young and altruistic in our mindset versus having this sort of business efficiency. So we shut it down. I then went to someone called Nicola Mann, who I'd met as part of our sort of investor outreach at Futurizing. And Nicola and I worked on sort of building an executive search company. She taught me the fundamentals of world-class executive search and stakeholder management, which transformed the way I thought about talent and made me genuinely excited to sort of be in this industry for the long run. COVID led to, I guess, the disappearance of our early stage clients and any hiring. Unfortunately, we had to close the firm, but it led me into sort of the startup world, and I started getting contracts at a few places, doing market mapping, working with sort of C-suite hires, and using those executive search skills. Eventually being hired as a sort of first recruiter in a couple of companies before finding Attio, which was a bit of a no-brainer because I'd always used CRMs in my recruiting workflow. And when I met Nick, we shared this vision that hiring managers should be responsible for hiring. And it had been incredibly hard to find sort of a founder that thought that way. And yeah, I guess lastly, the pivotal moment with Attio was that I wanted to go on the best possible journey with a startup in London, and it felt like it had this size of market and this product focus that meant it could be possible. And now I just feel super lucky that it's worked out as it is, but also there's so much left to build and so much more we need to grow.
That's awesome. Yeah, and Attio's been on such a tremendous tear, has such a kind of reputation for great people as well. And obviously a lot of that's the work that you've done and the work the team have done. Before we dive into that though, what's something interesting about you that most people wouldn't know or that perhaps you haven't said publicly before?
I think it's hard to say, Paddy. I think that I seem to be quite capable of doing lots of things people don't expect me to do. It's only recently that people realize I sort of like go and watch Chelsea play football most of their home games. People didn't see me as a person who goes to football games. Or I'll sort of come up with an AI experiment, whereas, a lot of my skills have been based in like hardcore networking. Yeah, I don't know. I'm struggling to find the answer that I think will be a great one
I thought
here.
we were going to be friends, Don, but now I know that you're a
Yeah.
hardcore Chelsea fan. I think that's a bit of a
I don't
problem,
know. It's just,
unfortunately.
I always seem to be doing the thing that doesn't fit a stereotype somehow. So yeah, I don't know how to define that, but I've never managed to fall into a box, I think.
There you go. Well, long may that continue. I think boxes are not a great place for people to be. Thinking back over your career, obviously you've been involved with hiring lots of excellent people. Is there one that stands out to you? Is there one that's kind of particularly memorable?
I think the memorable ones are pretty unique and go against all the processes and structure we learn around hiring. We've had one at Attio where one of our founding engineers found another engineer on Twitter, and they were just inspired by what that person was building open source and started sort of telling the rest of the team about it. You know, we had a strategy to get into that person's DMs, to get them on a call with our founder, our CTO, and it took it took a year, maybe 18 months, but we hired the person. And so the best hires for me are the ones where you feel like your whole business is hiring and everybody is behind it. They're really special ones. The process is great when you get there, but the sourcing exploration is where I get the most satisfaction from.
Can you tell us a bit more about this plan that you put together to get into their DMs? Like, what actually did you guys do? Like, what was?
Yeah, I think so. You know, it was, I think they were on Twitter. They were actually talking quite openly about, you know, finding a place where they could go and build this particular kind of feature. And so we were sort of well armed by themselves, and we were able to sort of send messages from our engineers. We were able to follow from CTO, founder, and eventually just send the right DM that was like, hey, look, like here's a link to book 2 calls on Monday. We're hiring, you know, can you speak to us? And they just did. And we got the time in the diary. It wasn't the right timing. We hired the person at least a year later, but they were sort of, I guess, they were waiting for the right moment to join Attio as soon as they had that call.
That's very cool. That's very cool. Thinking back over the hires you've been involved with and the things that have worked, the things that haven't worked, what's the difference in your mind between a good and a great hire?
So this is quite a recent feeling, but I think you should feel like you should have hired or could have hired the person sooner. And it's been really well described recently as negative maintenance, which I think sums it up really well. So when you hire someone and it just feels like they're making life easier for everyone around them, that's when I think the founder or the exec or the manager genuinely feels like the release or unblock that they were looking for. And that is what normally comes with a great hire.
What do you think goes into that?
I think it's a certain sort of mindset, and it's very startup scale up stage mindset. I think the characteristics are not necessarily data driven. And you can have people who are good at it, but being remote, people who are good at it in office, it's very hard to define in my view. But the output, the feeling is negative maintenance and this like release of, oh my God, thank God they're here.
Is there anyone in your team that stands out as a bit of a thank God they're here moment?
I think it happens a lot with our first hires, and they're really difficult hires to make. I remember, you know, we hired Roberto in finance. Ultimately, you've got technical founders. We have, you know, really senior advisors from marketing backgrounds. We had sort of, you know, an incredible investor board. There wasn't actually somebody who'd had a finance career. So it was very hard to think about what that person impact was going to be or how, you know, how much it was going to change our lives. And I do remember when we hired Roberto and a few months later, our founder feeling as though we genuinely have, you know, we should have done it sooner. It's been so impactful.
Yeah, I think when you hire that first finance person and they come in and then they're like, "Yeah, how did you get away with all of this for so long?"
Yes, yeah.
That's always the kind of the interesting bit. You know, they find out where the bodies are buried and where the things you should have done 6 months ago are. And I guess like when you think about the roles that you've worked, is there any one, you know, you mentioned there first of roles being hard,
Yeah.
100%, but is there one that sort of stands out to you as potentially the most difficult role that you've ever had to work?
Yeah, I'm actually finding it extremely hard today on hiring recruiters. And I think that is driven by a few things. So there's a sort of macro push for efficiency, the trend of hiring managers managing their hiring, the sort of traditional VC founder push for size and stage relevance. And it's all kind of leading to this talent pool that's not really matching up. So you've got, if you break them down, you've got a finite number of companies that have scaled in the last 5 to 10 years in whatever location you want to hire. You've got the hiring manager leading things so that the role of the recruiter is really, 90-95% on reviewing, sourcing, screening, getting the right profile in place and running the process is being taken care of. And then there's a sort of overall efficiency, and there's a bit of a sort of cognitive trend on hiring problem solvers versus process doers or people who want to do projects. So you end up with a world where the recruiter, your ideal recruiter, is actually a head of talent in a 200-300 person business. And it's really hard to match the two into a role.
So you're saying that basically the people that you would consider to be great recruiters, they're probably already leading talent at a kind of different sort of organization.
Yeah, and then you're asking them to come and be great recruiters again without sort of, I guess, a clear timeline on when they get to build a team, because you're a scaling
Yeah.
business, and it would be bad to make that promise.
It's a hard value prop as well. It's interesting. I think like many roles, recruitment is one that is guilty of over promoting people that are competent.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like a good recruiter will become a head of talent with enough time passing. Those
Yes.
are very different jobs.
Yeah.
Being a good recruiter doesn't make you a good head of talent. And I know plenty of good recruiters that probably shouldn't be heads of talent. And I know plenty of heads of talent that probably should be good recruiters.
Well, the second camp hopefully is the ones you can introduce me to.
Yeah. It's hard though, right? It's a bit like, I think once you go hands off, it's like a salesperson that, it's like if you're trying to hire an AE and you're speaking to like, somebody who's been a sales manager, they might be able to tell you they want to go back and pick up the phone and be an AE again, but it's really hard.
Yes.
And I think you don't see many people successfully transition back to being sort of hands-on in any discipline, actually. Whether that's engineering, whether that's marketing, whether it's recruitment. I think that often it gets swept up with people's ego and often their sense of like where they are in their career. And so people kind of block themselves. But
Yes.
the reality is, it's that old adage, right? If there's a rocket ship, so don't ask what the seat is, just get on.
Yeah, and I think that's sometimes a good thing, because if people have that mindset, you attract the person who's not thinking too deeply about the title and actually realizes, certainly in our case, realizes that joining at 100 people in, a market that's, doing more revenue than AI is like, probably still a very early stage, good time to get on board.
Recruiting is just a difficult one. I think the other challenge with hiring recruiters is they tend to interview well. So it can be very hard. I think I'll probably get some pushback on this, but I think with recruiters, it's probably a role where the interview is probably the least useful. And I think references are super important. I think back channel references particularly are very useful as well, because I've been in situations where I've hired recruiters and ultimately they've smashed the process, but they've not smashed the role. And I think that, again, like people often ask me like referrals and recommendations, and I've worked with many, many recruiters in my career, but it's a much smaller number that I would recommend.
Yeah, it's hard. It's probably one of our lighter processes, but it has the sort of heaviest weighting of sort of executive level people in it, because we have to sort of, like you say, make judgments and do back channel and references rather sort of than set people sourcing exercises or things like that. So yeah, it's generally shorter and more sort of case study driven than anything else.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's often, the very smart recruiters will often pass the processes, but like they're often the people that don't want to do the actual job. They want to do the projects, or they want to do the kind of the funner stuff around it. And sometimes you just got to grind pipeline.
Yeah.
There's only a few people in my life that I've met that are just, they are very, very good at pipeline recruitment, and they are very happy doing that. It's a very hard thing to find.
Yeah. Unfortunately for the majority of the people in talent today, that is, I think, the way it really is going. It's going to go very hard on pipeline and network as opposed to, projects and planning.
Yeah, agree. What are the successful traits of a recruiter in your mind?
I think there's an element of like magic about the best recruiters where it's not like, oh, they use this particular channel. They just sort of found they found the bunch of engineers 2 weeks before the layoff was announced, or, they found the community where somebody in product was part of it and they chatted about it in the office, and then they joined the community, and then they just found the little pool of fish that you just needed to find for that role. It's pretty much based around sort of curiosity and some sort of critical thinking and problem solving traits.
Yeah, I think I've always called it like, a good recruiter has a good nose.
Yeah, yeah,
And so,
and it
and so,
is, yeah,
it's they can look at a stack of CVs and they can tell you the one that's probably going to get hired. And I guess that, when you boil that down, what is that, right? It's people that are able to pattern match off like fragments of information. They're able to see patterns that others don't. They're able to perceive things. They've got high ability, high empathy, a high ability to sort of see those relational patterns. I think is probably the key.
yeah. And
And
it's a
again, how do you
relative,
measure that?
yeah. I mean, it's a relatively like abstract thing as well, but I do find that if people are, I think if people have grown up in more sociable environments than not, there are things like that that affect it. If they've managed to see more of the world or managed to kind of be in different kinds of socioeconomic groups through their life for whatever reason, there's something about that that just builds that algorithm in their head to have that nose and to have that instinct. They just are better at sort of judging people off the bat or off the bio or off the sort of appearance.
Yeah, I agree. When you think back to hires that haven't worked out, whether that's Attio or further back in your career, have there been like similar patterns or warning signs that you've observed that you watch out for now?
Yeah, I think there are there are archetypes. We use them at Attio. So you can have archetypes around, you can have good, bad archetypes. I think the bad archetypes are the people who perhaps are riding a wave. So you might see a profile, ex Google, ex Spotify, and in your head you're like, wow, those businesses, like everyone knows who they are, everyone loves the tech. But were they there when they had to solve the hardest problems, or what was the like challenge of them getting that job at the time they joined? So you do get sort of what we call like wave riders, and so we look out for that. I think that's an important archetype that comes up quite a lot, because you can get easily distracted by the quality of product, I guess, that somebody has seen, but it's more about the stage at which they saw it. Uh, I think job hopping is an obvious one. I don't personally look at, one or two changes happening quickly necessarily as down to the candidate. But you can, if you see it a bit more than that, you really do have to investigate it heavily. I personally, if I'm screening somebody, or if I get the sense that there is a huge focus on I guess their balance, and their benefits before you've gone through a process, I find it hard to think that person's going to be successful in the stage and size of companies that I've seen grow. It is challenging and it is difficult, and sometimes it's inconvenient, but it's not like unreasonable.
This is a topic. This is a really, really, in many quarters for many years, this has been a super contentious topic, right? It's been this idea that like, oh, you should be able to have complete work-life balance and work in a startup. You should be able to kind of, and I think there was this whole move, I'd say probably like the 2019, 2020 sort of time, where it was like, oh, we should make, startups are for everyone.
Yep.
And they're not.
Yep.
They're just not.
Yep.
I think that if you want a balanced life and you want to do a 9 to 5 and you want to do X, Y, and Z, the last place on earth you should work is a startup,
Yes.
because you will suck at it. Like, it will be very hard for you to find that balance. You will have to trade off constantly. It will either disappoint you massively or you'll disappoint the team massively. And I think that it's only just getting okay to say that.
Yep.
I think there's a difference between, things being accessible and things being for everyone. I think everyone, it should be for anyone, but it isn't for everybody.
No, exactly. So yeah, it's the top of funnel is for anyone, but we make it quite clear in our process as well, what the challenge is. And I don't think many people get to the point where they, end up chatting to say, our founder at the end of the process, and they're like, oh, actually, I can't do this. But I think there is a way out, at some point in the process for them to realize. And by the way, I have kids, I put them to bed at night, I take them to school in the morning. It's not like we're not talking about some sort of weird environment where everybody's just working all the time. It's more the sort of the mental load and the challenge of solving these problems day after day that is, just not for some people.
So it just requires a
And
level
that's
of,
fine. It is for some and it is for some others. It's just how it is.
It just requires a level of flexibility and, like I
Yeah,
said, where the priorities are, right? I think it's a good
yeah,
signal on that.
yeah.
What advice would you give to a candidate that's applying for a role, whether that's at Attio or anywhere?
I would really take your time. I think the best applications come in over the weekend. If you've got that feeling that something is really right for you, you should really be sort of dedicating a large chunk of your life in the short term to getting it and getting it right. On the other end, we've got a lot of noise, and so we need really quick and clear signal, which you can't do if you're having a shotgun approach or spreading your bets.
What do you think about these kind of like AI application tools that are out there at the moment?
I think that we will have career agents for everybody. I think they probably need to be focused on the individual as opposed to the collective group of people. And I'm quite excited for the world where all the career agents are talking to all the recruiter agents and figuring out if they should work together.
But are you seeing the sort of impact on your pipeline volumes today of kind of AI driven applications?
Not really. I think a lot of people keep saying there's loads of like fake stuff. There's loads of, you know, there's this massive increase in inbound. I don't really feel it. It's not like I'm not clicking on every other profile thinking that's fake or, why have 1,000 people managed to apply in the first hour? It's not really happening. I think maybe we're not big enough to be sort of attracting that almost like that DDoS attack or whatever equivalent it is in recruitment now.
CV attack.
Yeah, not honestly not feeling it today. Could change next week, I'm sure.
It's
Um,
interesting. I've seen, with some of the larger companies that I've spoken to of late, they are seeing like a pretty significant increase in volume. And
yeah,
I think that probably comes down to the prominence of their roles online.
yes, yeah, they're probably putting themselves out there for it, right?
And I think that, yeah, I think because a lot of these tools, effectively they just go and scrape Indeed or Google and then they just spam out stuff.
Yeah.
So I think wherever you rank in there, you probably see slightly more of it. Interesting.
But that's where
What
come back to taking your time. It will really stand out if you take your time and you can use AI to help you, but like it's you. And when you know it's you and you have that personal connection, that's how it starts.
I'm yet to read a piece of AI writing that it wasn't obvious that it was AI writing.
Yeah. And then,
Like of more than
everyone
like
knows.
10 words, right? Anything more than a sentence, right? It's just very obvious very quickly. So I don't know. I'm always confused. Like, what's the end game?
I know.
Like, what's the goal? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I will trick them. And then what?
No, you're just, yeah, you're just,
Now you've got the
yeah.
job. Now what?
No, you're just, yeah, I don't know. It's a bad approach to most achieving anything really.
Yeah. What advice would you give to somebody that's received a job offer? How do you encourage them to approach it?
I think from my perspective, there's often a lack of extremely clear and regular communication. I think I'm very aware that people are making a huge decision in their life. And I'm also sitting in a room with 3 or 4 people who want that person to say yes and are asking me, when are they going to say yes? So it's really difficult if you just don't know. And I also think that there's something that can be done here, which is a slight change in behavior. People often go to their sort of friends and family and network. So they go external around these decisions, but I don't think those people are always the best to sort of fully reason on them. They don't have the context, but you can use the like 3 or 4 people we're talking about in our company around making your decision. If you approach the founder and say, I'm not sure, I'm not sure I like it, you can say the wrong thing, but you can also approach the founder and say, look, I just really want to learn more about this. And I really want to understand this is the best thing for my, the next step in my career because, this is what I want to achieve. I think that founder is going to be really happy to like have another call, text on WhatsApp, whatever. And I think those people who've met you in the process still want you to make a great decision for your life. And if it's not their company, they want to find that out sooner as well.
Yeah, 100%. I guess like, is there anything you would encourage them, like if they're negotiating or they're coming into looking at an offer, like how would you encourage them to think about that part of the process as well?
I think for our stage and size, asking for more cash, less equity is a signal that you haven't fully understood the size of opportunity. And that's probably common for a lot of startup founders. I don't think they would react particularly well. Everyone's situation is different. Everyone's, entitled to find the value that works for them. But I've noticed that one. And then I think, yeah, just not hitting anyone at the end of the process with, wanting to be employed in a different way, not having the right to work, all these things that you have to come out at the top of the process, allow your recruiter, your hiring manager to genuinely like partner with you and get you the job rather than create this friction for operations teams or legal teams and stuff like that.
Makes sense. What do you wish that hiring managers knew about recruitment?
Everything, absolutely everything.
Anything particular that's painful that you just wish there was greater empathy on? I appreciate you've done a lot of work at Attio to kind of make that a much deeper understanding, but in most businesses, it's still quite separate.
I think we have, and it's still ongoing. I wouldn't say it's at the sort of flywheel stage that you want to get to. I think the best investment of time is at the start of a role. I think hiring managers should be, finding their first, 5 profiles, and coming to the team and saying, this is what I want to hire, and going to the exec and saying, this is the person that is going to do the job we need to do and why is it? And I think all of that, builds confidence in what we're looking for and why we need the person. And that helps run a smoother process. But I would encourage all hiring managers to almost block out a 2-week period where they're going to have to commit 25% of their time to calibrating and getting to the point where you then go to your recruitment team, and you can do that in hand with them, but you then have your recruitment team to sort of say, this is what we want, and they're the ones that are brilliant at going to find the 50 you need to convert into one hire or whatever it is, but it's the top of funnel.
Nice. And what do you wish candidates knew about recruitment?
Probably also everything. I think,
I don't know, Don. I think that recruiters make the worst candidates. So I think I wouldn't
yeah,
want them to
maybe.
know everything.
So I think what's quite interesting is if I'm talking to a candidate today for a job at Attio, we've already decided that that person is in the top like 1% of people that we've either sourced or seen or, has come our way. So I think it's something to be taken really seriously when a company, does talk to you. Uh, And there's also some consideration for there is this other like 99% of people in that market. And, you know, it comes back to that like negative maintenance thing around, are we actually working together to get the job? And are we, um, you know, are we being sort of super transparent and honest with each other throughout the process and being proactive and feeling like we're sort of partnering our way through? Because recruitment teams are having to deal with that other 99% in some way, whether it's just, seconds on a task or a review, or there's sort of a lot of work that's happening around us focusing on you being the person we're going to employ.
Well, Don, this has been fantastic. Thank you for taking the time today. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to seeing how things go at Attio and having you back on soon.
Thank you. I'm really disappointed. The only interesting thing I do is go and shower at a football match. I need to work on that.
Don, there's plenty of other interesting things about you. We'll just have to save them for the next episode.
Oh my God, yeah. I'm gonna, yeah, go home, rack my brains for one.